I'm leaving Apple after almost 30 years. Let me tell you why. Hey there, friends on YouTube. My name is Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. Tech so honest it hurts. If this is your first time here, thank you for stopping by. And if you've been here before, thank you for coming back again. Today, I'm going to talk about why I have finally decided to leave the Mac OS and Macintosh computers entirely and go over to the PC side. And before you do the whole thing where you're like, oh, this guy, he always does this, all that kind of stuff, just give me a second. Apple has been a part of my life for as long as I've used computers. I got my first Apple computer. It was a Classic 2, just a little screen like this, and it looked kind of like an R2-D2 or 2XL, if you recall 2XL. And that was the first computer that I ever had access to. I wrote papers on it. I wrote poems on it. I wrote lyrics on it. I did whatever it was that I could. I took it with me to New York and used it for the internet, used it for keeping in contact with people back in my hometown. Macs that I've used over the years, I've had the Classic 2. I've had a Performa model. I can't remember the model number. Original iMacs, Mac Mini, 3 27-inch iMacs, several MacBook Pros. I have an 2006 Mac Pro, and of course, most recently, I bought a 2017 iMac Pro. The iMac Pro has been a great computer, but what has upset me more than anything else is the warning signs that have been out there everywhere saying that something is not right with the company. Not only are they making mistakes, not only are they releasing products that fail, but there also is something about the corporate culture and the whole feel of being an Apple customer that is different now than it was when I first started to believe in Apple. I mean, I've been a creative professional in many different ways over the years. I've been a graphic design professional. I've been a recording hobbyist. I've been a recording engineer. I've also spent a lot of the last several years editing video almost exclusively on the Mac. I feel like I'm going to have to sacrifice some of the things that are good in order to extricate myself from this relationship which feels abusive. What happened that started this whole cascade of abusive treatment? I mean, you could look at the moment that Steve Jobs died and said, well, Steve Jobs died, and that's been almost 10 years ago now. And that is one place where there is definitely an inflection point. But even Steve Jobs had his moments with, the iPhone 4 and you're holding it wrong and all that kind of stuff. There's a long list of issues that we could point to with Apple and the Mac line that would say, something's not right in the state of Denmark. Most recently we see MacBook Pro keyboards. Version 3 of the MacBook Pro keyboards, the butterfly keyboards, which they promised were fixed, have started to fail. So not only did they redesign a keyboard that was going to replace one of the best keyboards in the business for something else, then they had one generation where it didn't work, and then they had 2 generations, and then they brought out the 3rd generation, which they were sure is going to work, and it didn't. It didn't. And when you stick with a bad design that many times over, I can't imagine what the thought process is. And it's not only the MacBook Pro keyboard. I mean, in 2016, they went away from giving you actual ports that you use and gave you 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports. I understand that Thunderbolt 3 is a great port, fast, it's versatile, it can do a lot of different things. However, at the time that Apple introduced the Thunderbolt 3 ports on the Macs, nobody had anything that ran on Thunderbolt 3. What people did have was USB-C-A, SD card reader, HDMI that they needed to plug in, all kinds of different things that forced a cottage industry of dongles and docks and all different kinds of things to be built up. And it meant that if you bought a MacBook Pro, you were also spending anywhere from $100 to $300, maybe even more, getting the things that you needed to be plugged into the computer. It was a less than elegant solution to a problem that didn't really exist. Then you look at the fact that they released models with chips that were just too powerful for the design of the laptop itself. I mean, Dave Lee did a great job of pointing out how the i9 chip thermal throttled, and they did produce a fix for that. But believe me when I tell you that the thermal throttling in that design is still ongoing, and they need to come up with a new cooling solution in order to make those chips in that computer more feasible. In 2013, Apple released their new version of the Mac Pro. Now, the Mac Pro before, all the way up to 2012, was really an amazing device. It was an amazing build. It was upgradable. It was everything that you needed if you were a professional using the Mac operating system. And they replaced it with something that looked interesting. The design was really nice, and it looked like no other computer that you'd ever used. It did look like your bathroom trash can, but they took away the upgradability. They went with a graphics solution that never panned out, in the sense that they thought that 2 graphics cards in computers were going to be the way of the future. They weren't. And then there were thermal issues that caused that computer to be basically unupgradable, and what they're selling now for $3,000 still in 2019 is the same thing that they were building in 2013. That is just, to me, unconscionable. I don't know how they justify that kind of pricing for that vintage a machine. I do believe that Apple is one of those companies that has its own soul, that has its own just magic that makes people believe in it, makes people fanatic for it. And in recent years, we've seen that specialness in Apple fade to be nothing more than a status symbol. If you have an iPhone or an iMac Pro or anything like that, it's just the status symbol of how much money you spend that makes Apple special now. This is the hard part. I still am a big fan of Apple. I still am probably an Apple sheep, an iSheep, a fanatic for the company, or whatever you want to call it. However, I've just gotten to a point where I can no longer support the company because they are no longer the company that I fell in love with. That might seem ridiculous, but it's true. I can't trust them anymore. I can't trust that the product that they're going to design and build is the product that's designed and built for my best interest, for the best interest of me, the consumer, who needs to use that product for both personal and business use. At this point, I mean, I don't even think we're at the beginning of the end for Apple. I think we're in the middle of the end for Apple. 2019 is going to be a really important year for them. If they come out with super gangbuster products that have all the problems fixed, then maybe they'll be okay, and maybe the tide will have turned. But I'm not holding my breath anymore, just waiting to see if Apple can get the old magic back. 30 years of supporting a company and using their products is a long time. I can't think of very many other companies that I've had that kind of relationship with over that kind of span of time. Nearly 2/3 of my life, I've been an Apple customer, but I'm not anymore. This feels like a divorce. There's still a lot of love there, but the abusiveness, the failures, and the overall just lack of caring from the company just tells me that it's time to move on. It's better than just sitting around and watching the whole thing fall apart. That's the reason I'm leaving Apple after 30 years of being a customer. Take this at least as a perspective from somebody who was there at the beginning of Apple and has watched the company through all of these years and now just feels like the magic is gone. Thanks so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. If you want to come back again, please like, subscribe, bell notify yourself, and do those kinds of things. And if you've been here before again, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me. Once again, my name is Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. Tech so honest it hurts. Until the next time, I'm out.